What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you don't already know me, my name is Ayman. I run the page The Frag Stop here on YouTube as well as on TikTok and Instagram, where I talk about all things fragrance related. In today's video, I wanted to talk about something that I'm always getting asked whenever I make a post, and that's what are my most complimented fragrances. And so the bulk of today's video is going to be talking about these fragrances that have gotten me the most amount of compliments. But before that, I wanted to talk about a couple things that you need to be doing in order to make sure you can get the most out of your fragrance and hopefully get a compliment. And the first thing I wanted to talk about is honestly the most important thing, even more important than the fragrance itself, and that's having good hygiene. And that means having good hygiene habits, such as showering every day, making sure you're using deodorant. Trust me, no fragrance is gonna cover up BO, so make sure you're using deodorant. Brushing your teeth every day, flossing your teeth, even moisturizing your skin, which can not only hydrate your skin, but also help with the longevity of the fragrance. You also want to take care of your appearance by making sure you're well groomed, whether that means getting regular haircuts or trimming your beard or even your outfit. And that doesn't mean you have to wear something formal or a tux or something nice everywhere you go. It just means you're wearing something that's clean, something that suits your style, suits your body. And honestly, I'm still working on that myself. But beyond your appearance and hygiene, another big factor that plays a role on whether or not you're gonna get a fragrance is your body language and whether or not you're approachable. Having a positive body language, being positive in general, being warm in your greetings, all those are things that are going to help make sure people feel comfortable enough to tell you that you smell good. In fact, most of the compliments I've ever gotten in my life have been in moments where I've been interacting with people, smiling, vibing with people, or just greeting someone. And it's usually that positive interaction that helps encourage people to come and tell you that you smell good, because let's face it, strangers are not going to go out of their way to tell you smell good. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it rarely does happen, and you're more likely to get a compliment from a person you know or from a friend than you are a stranger. And another big factor that I think plays a role in whether or not you're going to get a compliment is the amount of sprays that you're using. You gotta understand that each fragrance is different. Some fragrances are very heavy, very strong, and require a couple sprays, whereas others are fresh, light, and require a lot of sprays. And it's that sweet spot in the middle between overspraying and underspraying, where you're not overwhelming people with your fragrance, but you're still noticeable. And I think that sweet spot is where you're more likely to get the most compliments. Another thing you need to understand is that compliments come in many different forms, and sometimes it's not as direct as, hey, you smell good today. It might be in the form of, hey, you're always clean, or hey, you always take care of yourself, or even coming up and asking you for fragrance recommendations, because that just means that they think you know about fragrances because you constantly smell good. And finally, before I reveal my list of my most complimented fragrances, I wanted to take a moment and tell you guys that compliments do not matter. Sure, I'm not gonna lie, a compliment from a friend or from a stranger telling you that you smell good feels really nice. However, in the long run, you want to have a collection of fragrances that you truly enjoy and not a collection of fragrances that appeals to other people. You have to make sure that you are enjoying the fragrances you are wearing for yourself. You want to apply a fragrance and think to yourself, I smell good and I don't care what others think, because ultimately that's what matters. And that's honestly what this hobby is all about, which is expressing your own personal taste. In fact, a lot of the fragrances I'm going to be mentioning today are not even in my top 10 or top 15 favorite fragrances. There are other fragrances that are more suited to my taste but don't necessarily appeal to others as much as these fragrances do. Now that we're done with all the disclaimers, we can finally start talking about some of these most complimented fragrances, and we're going to start with number 1, Hibiscus Mahajat. Now, this is a floral, rose, and hibiscus fragrance that to me smells like drinking a very strong peach iced tea in the middle of summer. It's not your typical floral fragrance in that it is very sweet. It has an addicting-like quality to it that makes you want to smell it over and over again. Even between takes, I'm taking the cap off this fragrance and smelling it because it's just so addicting. And you may ask, why am I taking the cap off to smell it and not just spraying it on my arm? And that's because this stuff is absolutely nuclear. The performance on this fragrance is no joke. Not just this, but most Maison Crivelli extraits just have intense, crazy long performance and projection. However, this one I think is the strongest and lasts the longest on my skin and clothes. If you apply this fragrance on your clothes, forget about the smell coming off. You're gonna have to wash your clothes. And even on skin, this stuff easily lasts up to 12 hours. And this is why in the beginning of the video, I mentioned why you need to be careful with the amount of sprays. This is a very easy fragrance to overspray and overwhelm yourself with and others around you. I never go more than 3 to 4 sprays with this fragrance, especially if I'm wearing this in a closed environment or on a hot day. Now, I am a bit of an oversprayer, so I think even 1 to 2 sprays of this fragrance is more than enough to project and get people to notice you. And yeah, it's made the list as one of my most complimented fragrances. This has gotten me a lot of reactions. A lot of people have asked me what I was wearing. Both men and women love this stuff. It's crazy good and smells really, really nice. Before we move on, I do want to mention that this fragrance does lean a little bit feminine. It's definitely not a manly man fragrance, but I still think it's unisex enough for both men and women to pull off. And honestly, it doesn't matter whether it's a man or woman wearing this stuff. It smells good, man. And the next fragrance that has gotten me a lot of compliments is Parfums de Marly's Layton. Now, this was one of my first ever niche fragrances, and I'm sure that's the case for a lot of you guys watching. This fragrance has a lot of hype, and honestly for very good reason. This is a spicy vanilla fragrance with notes of apple, cardamom, and pepper. When I spray this, I get a very weird opening that smells a little bit like menthol, a little bit like Vicks if you've ever sprayed it. And as it dries down, I don't know if it's just me, but I have a little bit, or I pick up a little bit of a soapy opening. Nothing too fresh, just a little bit of like a soapy laundry freshness in this fragrance. But as soon as that starts to go away, that beautiful vanilla comes out and you're left with a very addicting and very masculine vanilla fragrance. I consider this fragrance to be the modern Aventus in that it is very, very mass appealing and very, very versatile. It's very easy to wear across like all ages, whether you're an older individual, a more mature individual, or a younger individual. I think anyone could wear this and smell really, really good. Like I said, the dry down of this fragrance is very, very addicting. It's sweet yet spicy at the same time. It's definitely woody, and it does have a masculine edge to it. I really, really love this fragrance. To this day, I still wear it. Not as much as I used to anymore, but I still enjoy this. I mainly wear this fragrance in the winter time, and it shines. It easily cuts through the cold and projects really well, and the performance is not bad either. I get a good 6 to 7 hours with this thing. The next fragrance that I have to mention is Armani's Stronger With You Intensely. I'm sure you guys have tried it. I've talked about this fragrance a couple times, but really quickly, it's a sweet vanilla toffee fragrance. It also has a little bit of spiciness from the cinnamon. I've heard some people call this Christmas in a bottle, which I kind of get. Now, this is a very sweet fragrance, but it's not a dense fragrance at all. It has a little bit of an airiness to it, which makes it a lot more versatile and avoids it being too cloying, which a lot of these sweet vanilla fragrances are. And because of the airiness in this fragrance, I feel like it's a little bit more versatile than other sweet fragrances with the same DNA. This is mostly a winter fragrance, but I think you could get away with wearing this in fall or even spring. Just go a little bit lighter with the sprays. But yeah, I think one of the best designer fragrances of all time. There's a reason it gets hype. I know you don't want to be an NPC. I know you don't want to wear a fragrance that everyone's wearing, but sometimes everyone wears the same fragrance because it's that good. And this is an example of that, because this is a beautiful fragrance that I consider to be a masterpiece for a designer fragrance. And yeah, very, very mass appealing and will definitely get you a lot of compliments. Really quickly before we move on, I will say that the Intensely version is a little bit more suited to the younger audience, like under 25. If you are older and are a fan of the DNA, then I'd suggest you check out Stronger With You Absolutely, which I do own, and I prefer it a lot more. It's a little bit darker and it's a little bit more boozy, but it's not as mass appealing as this one, and it hasn't gotten me as much compliments as Intensely has. Staying in the realm of designer fragrances, the next fragrance I want to talk about is YSL Myself Le Parfum. This is the new release, the 2024 version, not the old EDP, and I much more prefer this fragrance, and it has gotten me a lot, and I mean a lot of compliments. And that's mainly because it is extremely mass appealing and very hard to dislike. This is mainly a white floral fragrance that is a little bit powdery, a little bit bubblegummy with some vanilla. It opens up quite fresh with a little blast of citruses in the opening, but the florals are present all throughout. And as this fragrance dries down, it becomes a very beautiful laundry-like smell, which reminds me of summer when you used to wash your clothes for a really long time. Like that type of smell, this is exactly what this reminds me of. And whenever I talk about this fragrance, I like to mention how similar and how reminiscent this fragrance is to another more expensive niche fragrance, Amouage Reflection Man. Both of these fragrances are mainly white floral fragrances. This one has some added citruses and is made a lot more mass appealing than this one. I enjoy both and I prefer Amouage Reflection Man personally, but this one has gotten me more compliments and that's why it's made in this video and not this. The performance of this fragrance is not bad, but it's also not the best. You get 5 to 6 hours with some decent projection. And like I said, it's just a very versatile, clean white floral fragrance that I think every man should at least try and maybe even have in their collection. To me, this is one of the best designer releases of 2024. Much better than its brother, the EDP, which I don't really like. Now moving on to a cheap fragrance that has gotten me a lot of compliments, Lattafa's Teriyaq Intense. But it's not this particular fragrance that has actually gotten me a lot of compliments. It's the family that it belongs to, which is the Lattafa Khamra fragrance family. Lattafa Khamra has been one of my most complimented fragrances. I actually ran through an entire bottle, and instead of rebuying Khamra, I decided to pull the trigger on this one because I heard it was similar. And if you've watched my review on this fragrance, you'll know that I said that this stuff dries down almost identical to Lattafa Khamra. They both have that beautiful, sweet, addicting date note, which smells absolutely amazing. Only in this version, you add a beautiful, fresh plum liquor note, which I think is a wonderful and welcome addition to the Lattafa Khamra DNA and just elevated the fragrance. I couldn't tell you guys how many compliments I've gotten wearing Lattafa Khamra and now this fragrance. You guys really need to try. It's a cheap fragrance, so you're not losing much. I definitely recommend it. Now moving on to the world of fresh summer fragrances, which I find to be a lot more mass appealing and get me a lot more compliments than heavier winter fragrances. We're gonna start with this banger right here, Roja Oceania. Now this fragrance was a recent addition to my collection, so I'm gonna be as transparent as I can with you guys. I've not used this fragrance much, but it has made the list because every single time I've worn this fragrance, without fail, it has gotten me a positive comment or a compliment, which hasn't happened with any other fragrance in my collection. This fragrance to me is the epitome of elegant summer fragrances. It has your typical blue niche summer fragrance DNA with that beautiful citrusy minty opening. It's honestly quite similar to Parfums de Marly Sedley in that regard. However, there are things that make this one a lot different than Sedley. But to me, I consider this a better blended, more elegant version of Parfums de Marly Sedley. So if you enjoy this fragrance, which I do, as you can see, I've used a lot of it, then you're definitely gonna enjoy Roja Oceania. The main difference I get between this fragrance and Sedley is that this one adds some florals to the mixture and reduces the citruses, whereas Sedley likes to focus on the mint and the citrus more. But like I said, what really surprised me was how well blended this fragrance was. It honestly makes Parfums de Marly Sedley seem screechy and like a cheap fragrance compared to this one. But of course, you can't have it all, and a big problem I've noticed with Roja's Oceania is that the performance is not the best. I get around 4 to 5 hours of performance with this thing, which is not bad by any means. I just wish it lasted a little bit longer. And really quickly before we move on, I did want to mention that this fragrance uses a pressurized atomizer, and usually when using a fragrance that uses a pressurized atomizer, you want to up your sprays because, as you guys could see, a pressurized atomizer really spreads the fragrance out, which could affect performance. And so because the fragrance is so spread out, I think you really need to up your sprays in order to get the best performance out of these fragrances. The next fresh summer fragrance has gotten me a lot of compliments, and I mean a lot. This is, I think, by far my most complimented fragrance, Sospiro's Vibrato. I've already talked about this fragrance on my channel, but really quickly, it's a beautiful citrus, ginger, woody fragrance. It has a very bright opening with the citrus and the ginger, and it's very uplifting. Every time I spray this fragrance, it puts a smile on my face. It's perfect for those hot summer days and dries down into a beautiful vetiver, amber, candied orange type of smell. And another fragrance in my collection that has the same DNA as Sospiro's Vibrato is Ex Nihilo's The Hedonist. This fragrance has the same citrusy ginger opening as Suspiro's Vibrato with that beautiful woody dry down. The biggest difference is that this one is a lot brighter, whereas the citruses in this one are more muted and the woods are more exaggerated in this one as compared to this one. The main difference between these two fragrances is that the citruses on this one are very, very bright, whereas in this one they're very muted. This one has a much woodier dry down compared to Vibrato, and so Vibrato is a much more youthful, a much more playful, and a lot brighter fragrance when compared to this one. I think Vibrato is better for those hot summer days and vacations, whereas this one is better for work. Which one gets the most compliments? 100% Suspiro's Vibrato. Like I said, it's more youthful, it's more playful, it's louder than this fragrance, and so it's gonna get the most attention and the most compliments. Another thing that I've noticed about this family of fragrances that includes these two fragrances and fragrances like Bulgari Tiger and Louis Vuitton Immensity is that they appeal a lot to women. And what do I mean by that? All I mean is that it seems like women enjoy this type of DNA a lot more than men, because all the compliments I've gotten with these fragrances have been from women, which is the exact opposite of the next fragrance I'm going to talk about, which is Creed Aventus Cologne. With Creed's Aventus, I noticed that men seem to love this fragrance so much more than women, because all the compliments I've gotten while wearing this fragrance have been from men and not women. There's no denying that this fragrance is an absolute masterpiece, so much so that brands all over the world are cloning it and copying the DNA, whether it's in the designer world like Montblanc Explorer or in the clone world with fragrances like Club de Nuit. People just can't seem to get enough of this fragrance. It's a beautiful pineapple citrus fragrance with a woody dry down. I particularly enjoy this one. I did mention that I would never buy a Creed fragrance ever again in my last video, and ultimately that comes down to the performance. Now, it's not terrible in Creed's Aventus, it's around 5 to 6 hours, but when you're paying so much money for a fragrance like this, you really want it to last. So when I say I'm never gonna buy a Creed fragrance again, it's not because I don't enjoy the DNA. Creed's Aventus, or that Aventus DNA, is a DNA that I will forever love and will forever wear. It's just, I think I'm better off with a cologne fragrance because I am looking for a little bit more performance, which this can't deliver. And so yeah guys, that was it, my most complimented fragrances. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and let me know in the comments below what are your most complimented fragrances.